This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hi, I'm Davey. I'm back from Movember with a killer mustache and a fun EDH deck. This is my Thassa, Goddess of the Sea. Alright, first up we have our commander, Thassa, God of the Sea. 1 blue, 2 colorless. She's a legendary enchantment creature, god. She's a 5/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Blue colorless, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So I like her for several reasons. 1, she's the least expensive god. 2, scrying throughout the game is really useful. And 3, both being indestructible and enchantments in EDH makes it kind of hard to deal with. There's not as much enchantment removal in this format as in other formats. Mostly people run creature sweepers and artifact bang as their removal spells. There's not that much enchantment removal. And then she's indestructible as well. So really tuck effects and negative counters are the only things that can get her off the board. I also like that constantly scrying means that you should be able to consistently hit your land drop every turn. So, I have 29 swamps in the deck. Wasteland, Strip Mine, and Ghost Quarter. I run these to take care of Homeward Path. I do have control effects, and I don't like losing my control effects to Homeward Path in particular. Riptide Laboratory, I have a lot of wizards, so being able to bounce a wizard back to my hand both protects that wizard as well as allows it to trigger, come into play effect if it has one. Terrain Generator, this deck can draw a lot of cards, and Terrain Generator lets you, for 2 colorless and tap, put a basic land from your hand into play tapped, so you can get 2 land drops mid and late game. Darksteel Citadel, I mostly have this in here because I have Trinket Mage, and this is an additional land drop on a turn. I also have Tezzeret, and so this can be something that you tutor for 0 for with Tezzeret. It's also an indestructible land. Academy Ruins lets me get artifacts back. Urza's Factory lets me make dorks. Tolaria West can transmute for another land. I'll usually go for Riptide Laboratory or a Strip Mine effect if I need one. Reliquary Tower, we draw a lot of cards. And lastly, City of Shadows. This is so that I can use my control magic effects to get rid of creatures on the board and remove them from the game and increase the colorless mana I get out of this. So this is new. I haven't really played with this yet, but it seems like a cool way of turning control magic into permanent removal. Then some XL. I have Soul Ring, Caged Sun, which I can fetch with Treasure Mage, High Tide, which doubles your island's blue output for a turn, and Sea Scryer, which is a merfolk wizard, so it adds to my wizard count, and it's a mana elf. A critique I'd have of this deck is that I don't have enough mana XL in here. I have most of my quality mana XL in other decks, so it's a little light. If you're building a more competitive version of this deck, you might put more XL in. I kind of created this deck to try and not be a dick being plain blue, but I don't know if that's possible with blue, but I'm trying. So this is intentionally a mid-power deck. Sage of Epityr, he's a sort wizard for 1 drop. There's not a whole lot you can do early in the game, so getting a wizard that you can later use either with a wizard effect or something like opposition, so that you can tap your creatures and tap other people's creatures is good. You want to get a variety of creatures into play. Enclave Cryptologist, he's a looter when you level him up, and he's tapped to draw a card when you level him all the way up. Martyr of Frost is a 1-drop that can become a counterspell. Keeper of the Mind is new. It's an inexpensive wizard that pay blue and tap to draw a card. Play this ability only if target opponent controls at least 2 more cards in hand than you. In EDH, you have multiple opponents, so you can just pick one during their draw phase, tap to draw a card. Snapcaster Mage to recur my instants and sorceries. This plays very well with Riptide Laboratory, being able to bounce and reuse multiple instants and sorceries. Voidmage Prodigy. 2 blue, sacrifice a wizard, counter target spell. One of my only pieces of hard counter in the deck. I like this and Patron Wizard better than Urtai because they can be used immediately, where Urtai you have to wait around a turn. And so he also has 2 blue, which contributes to the devotion cost for turning Thassa into a creature. Shapesharer is one of my favorite discoveries of this past year. Blue colorless, it's a shapeshifter, so it counts as a wizard. And then blue and 2 colorless, and target shapeshifter you control becomes a copy of target creature until your next turn. So as a 2-drop, you could turn this into a huge Eldrazi or another troublesome creature. He kind of got powered down with the new legendary rules, but he's still good in this deck. Temporal Adept. This is capsize on a body. He counts as a wizard. He also has 2 blue devotion, so he's a nice include. Very, very useful creature. Sigil Tracer. Blue colorless, tap 2 untapped wizards you control. Copy target instant or sorcery spell. So this is a fork on a body. 2/2 body wizard. Now I have a couple of creatures that protect my permanents and other creatures in the deck. I have Rain, Academy Chancellor. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or ability controlled by one of your opponents, you may draw a card. And if Rain, Academy Chancellor is enchanted, you may draw another card. So at the very least, when she hits the table, you'll be able to replace her, and she can dissuade people from just destroying your permanents because they want to bring down your devotion. And on that same theme, I have Kira, Great Glass Spinner. Kira is a very high quality card, 2 blue, so it counts for my devotion, and creatures I control have whenever they become the target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, counter that spell. Patron Wizard, this guy's great. Tap an untapped wizard you control, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. He's not a hard counter, but he does make people second guess what they can do, so it can get them to slow their roll. And he's got 3 blue, so he really helps with the devotion count. Voidmage Husher. 2/2 flash. When Voidmage Husher comes into play, counter target activated ability. You can do this to shut down Snaplands. It's pretty mean, and a whole bunch of other activated abilities. It's not often that you have the opportunity to counter activated abilities, and this is also cool because whenever you play a spell, you can return Voidmage Husher to your hand, so you can use it multiple times. Sower of Temptation, 2/2 flying fairy wizard. When he comes into play, gain control of target creature. You can bounce this with Reliquary Tower. So you could play Sower of Temptation, sack a creature off to the City of Shadows, bounce it using the, not the Reliquary Tower, sorry, the Riptide Laboratory. Solid creature. Surge Spanner. This is a 2/2 merfolk wizard. Whenever he becomes tapped, you can pay blue colorless. If you do, return target permanent to its owner's hand. So you can bounce lands, enchantments, whatever. I run a couple of other cards that'll let you tap without attacking. Opposition, Mind Over Matter, and Azami. So you can tap and bounce for 2 blue. Very helpful. This is a new include. I owe credit for adding this to Sean McGowan over at Star City on the Ask Azami commander thread, which I enjoy reading. Or a Thief. When it's put into the graveyard from play, you gain control of all enchantments. Wow! So that's really one of the few ways that you can deal with gods. Why try and kill them when you could just control them? I don't have a sack outlet for this guy, but unless somebody has a remove from game or tuck effect, he's probably going to die. Really big value on that. I have Tezzeret the Seeker in here. I use him mainly to fetch up my small artifact utility, but I do have a number of artifacts, and I have one by going ultimate with him. Super useful. First thing I'll usually use him for is the X, search your library for an artifact and put it into play with mana cost X. If mana cost is 0, his devotion doesn't go down. Mages of the Future. I underused this card for years and years. It's just been kind of sitting in my collection. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You can play the top card of your library. 3 blue for devotion. He's a wizard. Great card advantage. And similarly, Future Sight plays the same way and is harder to remove. 3 blue devotion does the same thing. A great include for a Thassa deck. Azami, Lady of Scrolls. This was the previous general for this deck. I am kind of intentionally running this not with her as the general, just to not be a DB. She's still really, really good. Combo with Mind Over Matter, and you can draw your whole deck. That's in the deck. We try not to run infinites as a matter of course in our play group, but with her not being the general, it's kind of harder to pull off. Great card advantage card. Mind Over Matter. This card has a dirty reputation, and it deserves it. I couldn't resist, though. 4 blue devotion, and it's legal to play. It doesn't combo straight off the general, but the 2 of those together automatically turn her into a 5/5 indestructible creature. And then with Psychosis Crawler, Mind Over Matter, and Azami, you can kill the board. Then I have Tidespout Tyrant, 5/5 flying, 3 big devotion. Whenever you cast a spell, you may return target permanent to its owner's hand. This guy draws a lot of hate. He deserves it. Probably recommend casting him the same turn that you have High Tide so that you can at least affect the board before he gets whacked. This guy has an amazing ability to top deck removal when he hits the table. And speaking of guys that get killed fast or die, I do run a Memnarch in here. He's not the general. I don't have infinite mana with Palancron in here. I actually have never played this guy in Commander, but I am running him in this deck because he controls things and I can sack things off to the City of Shadows, and I do need some other win conditions. So now I have some search. So I have Trinket Mage, 2/2, gets a Soul Ring, gets Darksteel Citadel. Those are the main 2 things that I'll fetch with this. He counts as a wizard. I just started running Treasure Mage again because I found out about this alt art version, which is pretty. There's only 2 cards that this can get in this current configuration, which is the it can get Memnarch, and it can also get the Cage Sun. One thing I've considered adding to this would be other 6 cost stuff. Mindslaver, Wormcoil Engine, and Duplicant would be at the top of the list. Really, that's another reason I added Memnarch, was so I could fetch something out. I just couldn't resist. This art is too cool and pretty to not play it. Vedalken AEthermage. This guy is a tutor for a wizard. Usually this guy says fetch to Fury, but I'm not running to Fury in this deck because he's slated for more competitive decks. If I was making this deck more competitive, I'd definitely add to Fury to it. But this guy can go and get all sorts of utility wizards for you. Probably the Patron Wizard most often. Okay, great. Now, on to enchantments. I run a bunch of enchantments. Like I said, enchantments are harder to clear. They count towards my devotion. Keeping my devotion up for my indestructible creature is important. Opposition's great. It turns your dorks into icy manipulators. That's fantastic. Dissipation Field. I just started using this as well. Whenever a permanent deals damage to you, return it to its owner's hand. It's just a rattlesnake. Don't hit me. You'll have to bounce. Propaganda pays dividends that you can't count. This hits the table and surprise, surprise, you get attacked less. Some people really resent that you have it, but they still don't usually enjoy paying the taxes to attack you. So it's just a great way of saying attack somebody else. Enchantment helps count towards my devotion. Condescend. I took out regular counterspell to add Condescend because I like having versatility in my cards in EDH. This one's great. Counter for X or Scry 2. Early, I could just pay 1 and Scry 2, or I might find a spell I want to counter. I run Spell Crumple and Hinder. Some troublesome generals just have to be tucked. These are great counter spells for this format, so they're auto-includes for mono blue. Mindbreak Trap. This I run because it can be cast for free, but also because it's not actually countering the spell. This is exile any number of target spells. So if somebody casts, say, an Exsanguinate with Boseiju, you can counter it with this. So there's some really cool, tricky things you can do with Mindbreak Trap that you can't do with other kinds of counter spells because it exiles the spell on the stack. Venser does this as well. He bounces the spell on the stack. He doesn't counter it. Force of Will, I'm running all this blue, so I might as well be able to zero counter sometimes. Like I said, I don't run a lot of counter, but you're blue, so you want to keep people guessing. Time Stop, amazing, amazing card. 2 blue, 4 colorless, end the turn, and exile all cards on the stack. Once again, you can play that as a counter spell that doesn't say counter spell, so target spell can't be countered. You're ending the stack. Everything on the stack gets exiled. Somebody goes ape with Avenger of Zendikar and Crater Hoof Behemoth. End the turn. It's over. An auto include for any blue deck in EDH. This is just gonna save your life so many times. Commandeer. This is fun. 2 blue, 5 colorless, gain control of target non-creature spell. I grabbed a Praetor's Council with this one time. Awesome. It also can be cast for 0 by removing 2 blue cards in your hand from the game rather than paying its mana cost. I usually like my cards. I don't like removing them from the game, but somebody tooth and nails, now you get to tooth and nail and they don't. Spin into Myth. Some creatures have to be tucked. This is one of the few cards that can do it. Evacuation. This is the closest thing to Wrath of God for blue, besides Curse of the Swine, which is also an amazing card for blue. I don't have Curse of the Swine in here, but instant return all creatures to their owner's hands. Last week, somebody cast Decree of Pain, was wiping the board and about to fill their hand with a bunch of cards. I evacuated in response, so everything went back to people's hands, and Homeboy didn't get to draw all his cards. Ixodron. This one's in Spanish. When he comes into play, turn all other creatures face down, and they are 2/2s with no abilities. If you turn over commanders, that card still counts as a commander, but creatures affect the board, and all of a sudden they stop affecting the board. This guy is pretty awesome. His PT is equal to the number of 2/2 face down. He also works with Voidmage Prodigy in this deck. Can flip him face down, and when Voidmage Prodigy flips up, he can do something cool. I don't remember what it is at the minute. Nevinril's Disc. I actually would recommend Oblivion Stone first, because you can use it the same turn, but my Oblivion Stone is committed to a more competitive deck, so Disc is the next best thing. This is a slightly revised one, so it's pay 1:: it comes into play tapped. Cyclonic Rift. If you're running blue at all, you should be playing this in EDH. This is a game changer. Ratchet Spell Bomb. I leave it at 0 most of the time to kill tokens. Tomard's Crypt, you got to be able to hate the graveyard. I lost a game last week with this deck because I could not get rid of his graveyard. I cast Trinket Mage and was searching desperately for it, and it wasn't in there, and I lost as a result. So Trinket Mage and Teferi for 0 can both grab this. Yeah, really good. You can recycle it with Academy Ruins. I also have a Time Twister in here that'll, or the more expensive Time Twister that'll let me get it back. Okay, Sword of War and Peace. Now I have this in here to gain life, which you need with blue, but also because Thassa's other ability is target creature you control can't be blocked. So that means that I can consistently get this through and gain life and deal a lot more damage to people. So that's a way of making my dorks more powerful and also taking advantage of the target creature can't be blocked mechanic. And similarly, Quintus Spike actually lets you really get the game moving faster. When a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of his or her life. So you can really change the game with this really fast. I have Proteus Staff. This is a cool, it's a polymorph on a stick. Put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library, and that creature's controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card. You can only play this as sorcery speed, but since I run control effects, what I might do is control somebody's general and then tuck their general, and then I get the creature out of my library. If I don't have a control effect, I still might want to tuck a general just because something else in their deck randomly would be better, as long as they're not running Eldrazi. It's better to try and control this, but polymorph on a stick, tuck on a stick is great. Vedalken Shackles, everything in here is islands, so I can gain control of anything. This is an essential card for a mono blue deck. Quicksilver Fountain, this is a cool card. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts a flood counter on target non-island land he or she controls. That land is an island as long as it has a flood counter on it. At end of turn, if all lands in play are islands, remove all flood counters from them. So this is this kind of slows the board down. People have to choose constantly whether they want to play a land that turn and have it eventually become an island, or not play a land so that the flood counter is clear. There's nothing that'll remove flood counters. So this is some passive aggressive disruption. There's absolutely no downside for you, and a whole lot of downside for people that are gradually having their lands turned into colorless mana producers. Biden of Thassa, it's thematic. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card. Gotta have your Biden. And blue colorless creatures your opponents control attack this turn to Fable. Some interesting politics you may be able to pull with that. I got these in sequential packs, like 1-2, so that kind of inspired me to make the deck. Trading Post, tons of value out of this. I mainly have it in here for the life gain, because when you play blue, people tend to take your life away, but it's also really versatile. Call of the Kindred, this was another inspiration for the deck. It's in an aura. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may look at the top 5 cards of your library. If you do, you may put a creature card that shares a creature type with enchanted creature from among them onto the battlefield. Then put the rest of those cards in the bottom of your library in any order. Well, I have a ton of wizards in here, so I enchant a wizard, and at the beginning of my upkeep, reveal 5 and put any wizard into play. One of those wizards might be Memnarch. That's a lot of value. There's not a whole lot of other blue tribes you could use this card with, so Wizard Tribal, this was one of the main inspirations for it. Leyline of Anticipation, 2 blue counts for my devotion. If it's in my hand at the beginning of the game, I get to play in response to everybody else. That's awesome. Hard casting this later in the game doesn't happen as often. It's an enchantment, so difficult to remove. Rite of Replication, this can let you finish the game with a bang. It's kind of an EDH staple. I thought about cutting it. I think it's a really fun way to win. I mean, eventually you do have to win. Blue slows down the pace of the game and controls things, but eventually you got to have a big win. Sepulchers are great things to copy with this, because then it can really chain. And the last card in the deck is Time Spiral. Let's do it again. Get everything back. I have seldom cast this card and not won afterwards. If you can cast High Tide or have a Cage Sun in play, tap 6 lands, get 12 mana, cast this, untap those lands, then get a full hand. The thing that's great about this, some people don't like draw 7s for opponents because it gives them the benefit of using those 7 cards before you, but not with this, because it untaps your lands first. So you're the first person who gets to act after casting Time Spiral. So that's the main deck. I chose to go Wizard Tribal. I wanted to show you some of the cards that I chose not to include. Now there's some obvious missing pieces. I don't have Cryptic Command in there. I don't have Teferi. I don't have Venser in there. You would probably want to include those if you wanted to make it more competitive. I also don't have any sorcery or instant-based draw in the deck, mainly because I rely on creatures and a zombie to get that. But there's no Brainstorm, might add that. There's no Deep Analysis. It's Wizard Tribal, so you could go with an Aether Adept for a bounce when it comes into play. Sage of Fables, each other wizard comes into play with an additional +1/+1 counter. Thought about adding that, ultimately axed it. Then I think a smart way to play Thassa if you weren't going with the tribal theme would be to play like a Thieving Magpie style strategy. So Scroll Thief, Stealer of Secrets, Nuriok Commando, Ninja the Deep Hours, Thieving Magpie. Each of those using with Thassa's whenever being able to make creatures unblockable means that you get cards. None of these guys are wizards, so they didn't have wizard synergy, but I think other Thassa decks would probably want to take advantage of the unblockable ability and getting more value out of that. And then another card I didn't include, but is a really great card for blue, is Phyrexian Ingester, because it removes a creature from the game, so it's one of blue's few hard removal spells. So some things to consider in your own builds. Thank you for watching CMDR decks. I want to give props to Chewy for the idea of putting figurines in the staging around the deck. I think that's a pretty cool idea. And congrats to Uriah for another year of CMDR decks. If you like this video, please subscribe and favorite every week. New EDH Tech. Bye.